Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. In this week's video, we're going to talk about weapon-mounted light techniques with the handgun.
Whoa, hey, can I help you guys? Whoa, what do you got there? What do you got there? Hey, stay back, drop the fucking knife. I have...
Now, with improvements in technology, we've seen weapon lights get more inexpensive and smaller and brighter. And that's a really, really good thing, because a weapon-mounted light is a very good thing to have on your weapon, but it shouldn't be your default light source. And this is something I've talked about in videos, in fact, recently when I went over handheld light techniques. This should be your default light source. This is a mandatory item you should have as part of your everyday carry kit. A weapon-mounted light is a device that's strongly recommended. We're going to use a handheld light much more often than we're going to need a weapon-mounted light, because we can't use the two in the same way. If you think about it, I can have this light in my hand, just like I've talked about, at any time and use it to gather data. Lights are replacement for daylight. That is what they are. That's what they do for us. So if we're in a dark environment, be it natural nighttime or in any kind of indoor environment where light is reduced to a level to where we need an aid to see, we want the light to replace daylight. There's not a lumen cap if you're using proper techniques. Some people say, well, for indoors you should only have X amount of lumens. I totally disagree with that. If you don't have any training or any concept whatsoever, then yes, 250 lumens is probably going to be sufficient, but I don't want to depend on probably. So for me, I want the sun. I want the sun on the end of my gun. Back to the handheld light. I can have this out, and a polite society is willing to accept that, hey, it's just a flashlight. Now, if I'm looking for my car keys, some people are just not going to accept this, which is why this lighting source is for the use of the firearm only. If I have a reasonable expectation needing the gun, that's when the weapon-mounted light comes into play. Now let's talk about techniques that we use with the firearm with the weapon light. So, I'm in an environment where I need the aid of light, but I might not necessarily need the aid of a weapon-mounted light. I haven't perceived a threat. There's no reasonable expectation of needing the firearm. So my handheld light's going to be my default. If I find myself in a situation where I feel like I need to draw the firearm, or maybe it's, it's at home, it's late at night, I hear a bump, I get up. I'm probably going to default to the weapon-mounted light in a home defense situation. But if I'm out in the general public, I'm in a parking garage, or I'm in a dark environment, wherever I happen to be, I'm out in a baseball field or the park or something like that, the handheld light's in my hand. If I need data, I get data. If I don't need data, the light stays off. Most of the situations you're going to find yourself in, there's going to be enough ambient light where you don't need the light for a constant on situation. But in the event that I feel like I have a reasonable expectation of needing the firearm, I perceive a threat, the handheld light's going to go away, the weapon-mounted light's going to come out. It might happen at the same time. You think about draw stroke. Now that handgun is out, I still have the weapon-mounted light in my hand. How do I transition between the two? That's completely based on time. If I have time available to me, I can turn this off, go to my weapon-mounted light, and when I'm able, I can put this away. If I don't have time to do that, I may go, as the draw stroke occurs, I may drop that light and turn this one on. I just dropped my light. Well, I don't really care, because my main concern is getting data for the use of the firearm. If I need to use the gun, I need to use it quickly. Or I need to have it out quickly, and I need to be in a position where I'm not fumbling around with that other light. So if I have time to put it in my pocket, I will. If I don't, I'm just going to drop the damn thing. I can come back and get it later. I'm now using my weapon-mounted light. What is one of the distinct disadvantages to the use of a weapon-mounted light? I can only illuminate largely where I'm pointing the gun. You think about a home defense situation, that could mean you might muzzle things you do not want to muzzle, such as family members, pets, loved ones, what have you. I only want to point this gun at known or unknown threats. Is there a way to control the firearm and not point it at people and still illuminate with it? Yeah, we've already talked about that. What I'm doing right now is called umbrella lighting. I'm pointing the muzzle up, I'm illuminating the room well enough to where I can see. If I recognize a threat, I can immediately aim in and go for light control, issue verbal commands if verbal commands make sense. Can I light down? Yes, I can use baseboard lighting. My personal feeling is anytime you can do umbrella lighting, this should be the technique you use. The gun is pointed up. Is that a safe direction? Yeah, it is, depending on the context of the situation you're in. If the gun goes off and I'm outdoors, will that bullet come down? Absolutely. That's why I use firearm safety and I don't have my finger on the trigger when I'm not intending to fire. If I'm in an environment where up doesn't make sense, baseboard lighting works fine. I can illuminate the floor off there and I'm saving my vision. Now I've got these white walls. I don't want backsplash. People talk a lot about backsplash. The thing about backsplash is it only happens to you if you let it happen. If I don't need to be on my sights, there's no reason for me to keep the hotspot in where my visual horizon is going to be. If I'm entering a room and I'm umbrella lighting or I'm baseboard lighting, I don't have the concern of backsplash. So that right there kills the maximum lumen argument. I can have 2, 3, 5, 6,000 lumens on this handgun light. I wish they made one. And as long as I'm not pointing it in my visual horizon when I'm getting into tight spaces, backsplash will not occur. Off the ceiling, off the floor. If I see a threat, I'm going to put the hotspot right in his face. All right, for whatever reason, I've decided to draw my firearm. My firearm's out, I'm using my weapon mounted light. Am I going to use it in a constant on position? Context dependent. If I have to carry a small child or if I have to guide someone, I don't have the ability to on-off. I need to go to constant on and just go ahead and take that potential disadvantage of the light being constant on and telegraphing my movements and my location, because I've got to physically control another person. I can't work the light and the gun with the same finger. It's just not going to work. If you're using a DG switch, you have that option. Using some kind of pressure pad or something like that, that's an option that you have. If I'm just using a dedicated light, where I'm normally controlling it with my support hand, that option does not exist, so I'm not going to do it. So the weapon mounted light, another disadvantage, potential disadvantage we're going to have is if I'm confronting a threat, I'm going to have to keep the hotspot in their face to control them. So I've got my bad guy, my weapon mounted light needs to control the face. So if I have to shoot, where do I have to shoot? The face. Most people's tendency, even on weapon mounted lights, is to run the light a little bit low to the chest area. And that's not a good thing, because now I'm somewhat reducing my control of my bad guy's visual horizon. If the light is in his face, he knows I'm behind the light potentially. Does he know I'm actually aiming a firearm at him though? This is another disadvantage we have with weapon mounted lights. I may need to verbalize that. Get back, I have a gun! Get back, I have a gun! I may need to verbalize the fact that I have a firearm because all he sees is light. If I'm using light control properly, I'm removing his visual horizon, he may not know a gun's pointed. So, something we've talked about, again, we're using cover and concealment, something I've talked about with the use of handheld lights. One of the disadvantages is, depending on which side the cover exposes to, it's going to vary which technique you use, because certain techniques will expose more of you to the potential threats or the threats than other techniques. So this situation, if I'm using a handheld light, weapon comes out. Me being primarily left-handed shooter, the world's kind of my oyster right now. I can use your Harry's grip, and I'm getting out, I'm exposing very little of myself to actually engage the threat. Just like that. This is my exposure. Now, if I'm a right-handed shooter, and I use a Harry's grip, I'm exposing quite a bit of myself to get that light out there. So if I was right-handed using a left side exposure, I'm probably going to go with like a modified FBI, something like that, so I can expose less of myself to the threat to get the gun in the fight. The weapon mounted light kind of removes that problem. Using a weapon mounted light, I'm only exposing enough of the gun to get in the fight. Now I want to suck up on that cover, push the weapon light past it so I don't backsplash myself like this. Go ahead and get that gun out past the cover. If I'm using cover from distance and I'm bringing the gun out, as you can see, I'm backsplashing myself pretty bad. The only other way around that is to only turn the light on once you actually come out from behind cover. Otherwise, you're going to backsplash yourself. And even here, some of my cornea, not the hot spot, some of the cornea is striking that wall and I'm getting backlit because of it. So that's one of the reasons we suggest that you suck up to the cover and push the light as far past it as you're able to. Now, again, talking about backsplash from a different angle. You guys can see me, I'm behind the cover. If I'm illuminating the cover, backsplash, I'm illuminating. If I'm using the cover from back here, I'm still, to a certain degree, illuminating myself. I want to suck up on that cover, push the light past it as much as I'm able. Make sure you keep yourself behind the cover, obviously. The more things we have to worry about, the more techniques we have to utilize, and the less training and practice we have with those techniques, the more mistakes we're likely to make. So if I'm inexperienced with the use of cover in low light situations, I'm more likely to focus on making sure I'm not backsplashing myself, but in the process, I may expose more of myself potentially to the threat. So if I'm like, okay, I gotta get my light past, get my light past, you see, I got a little bit of foot out there. Not a huge deal, but it is an issue that I have to be aware of. I have to make sure, okay, I'm behind cover, making sure I'm behind cover. I'm only going to put as much of myself out there as I have to actually get involved. I may brace a hand off the cover to aid in stability, what have you, but I'm going to get the gun past the cover so I'm not backsplashing myself.
Drop the gun, drop the gun!
So I'm in an environment where I'm using my handheld light. It's dark, I have it in my hand, I'm using it when I need it. And anytime I need data, I go ahead and use the light. If I perceive a need for the firearm, there's a draw stroke that needs to take place. Whether I carry appendix, hip, small back, wherever the gun is carried, in the purse, whatever the situation is. That draw stroke is probably going to be a one-handed draw stroke, especially if I'm illuminating a potential threat. If I'm using light control on my bad guy and he's reaching in his waistband, or he's, producing a weapon, or he's using some kind of verbals to tell me he's a threat, the gun needs to come out. Now, can I still do a two-handed draw stroke? Yeah, but I lose potential light control, and that's an issue. So again, this comes back to being proficient with a one-handed from concealment draw technique. If I'm in a law enforcement setting, I'm carrying on a duty belt, it's not an issue. I can clear the bail or release the ALS or whatever holster system I'm using and bring the gun out, and I don't have that big of a problem. But if I'm carrying concealed, which I think most people are probably going to be appreciative of this, I have to be able to perform that draw stroke with one hand. Is it going to be slower? Yes, it is going to be slower because I have to physically clear the garment with my draw hand and then draw the firearm. There's a number of different ways to do that. Things I've talked about before in the past, I'm not really going to get into it in this video. But suffice to say, it's something you need to practice, something you need to be proficient with. This is just one more reason, on top of all those other reasons, where a one-handed draw stroke is something that you really need to be proficient with. Lights up, I don't have the luxury, potentially, of being able to do a two-handed draw stroke. So I'm going to go ahead and maintain my light control, keep my light in my hand, clear the garment, bring the weapon out. At this point, and we've already talked about this a little bit, I can disengage this light and then go to light control on the firearm. Or if I have time, I can put that light in my pocket. One of the things I've observed in low light training is people having their primary hand placement is going to be pretty much the same. Their support hand placement is going to be slightly different because they need to operate the light. No matter what light you use, be it a stream light or a Surefire, or unfortunately if you have an APL, the switch systems are going to be different by design. But they still require a slightly different support hand grip to operate. Now, if you're using a DG switch, the only thing you need to worry about is hand pressure to operate that light. But if you're using the manual switch system, as I make my transition, let's say, I drop the handheld, I draw a firearm. Or if, for whatever reason, I'm going straight to the gun. As the gun comes out, my default hand placement is going to be this. That's what I automatically went to. Now me, I spent enough time doing this that I'm in daylight. I'm a thinking animal. I realize I don't need the weapon light in this situation. So for me, I'm going to default. But say I did need the weapon light. As the draw occurs, this is not the grip I want to initially assume. I want to immediately go to that push forward switch system on the Surefire. If it's an enforce, or not an enforce I'm going to be pushing in. If it's a stream light, I'm going to be working that rocker. Whatever the situation, whatever the light system is, as the gun comes out, I don't want to necessarily assume my default grip. I want to go straight to a modified grip to work that weapon light. As you'll see here, there's a significant difference in placement between a traditional grip and working the weapon light. And this is one of the few things that is mirrored from left to right hand. As a right-handed shooter, same issue. Traditional grip, traditional daylight shooting grip, weapon light shooting grip is going to be slightly different. The light system you use is going to determine how recoil affects the operation of the light. With the Surefires, you press straight in or you knock that rocker down. Now, Surefire doesn't have a momentary only rocker like the Streamlight does. Their rocker system is constant on when you go up or down. In that situation, recoil management is not an issue with the Surefire. If you go to constant on and then you assume your regular shooting grip, you're good to go. But if you're working that rocker and you're pushing in on it, recoil will affect your thumb placement, caliber dependent. I know 40 calibers are really bad. I see a lot of lights going on and off when I see people shoot with those lights when they're pressing in, because that high pressure recoil arc is throwing their thumb off finger placement. So when you dig into the Surefire, you need to press into it almost to the point of physical pain. The Enforce and the Streamlight, not such a great degree because you're pressing straight in and you're pressing straight down. This is something you need to practice, be proficient with. Make sure you have the ability for secondary hand placement, and you shoot with that secondary hand placement. Even if it's not low light, practice it at the range. Get used to the idea that you may have to operate your firearm with a non-traditional grip so you can operate that weapon light. So as you guys can see, there's not a lot of magic to using a weapon mounted light on the handgun, but there are some techniques that you need to be proficient with, and there's some knowledge you need to have. The use of cover, suspect control, bad guy control, transitioning from a handheld to a weapon mounted light, things of that nature. There are some very distinct advantages to using a weapon mounted light. However, there are some certain disadvantages you have to be aware of. If you have, for whatever reason, if you're using the firearm for navigation, then you have to be muzzle awareness, you have to think about that. When it comes to backsplash, that is a self-correcting issue. I say that facetiously and seriously. If I know there's a wall there, there's no reason for me to keep that hotspot in my visual horizon. And if I'm controlling a bad guy, you may experience some degree of backsplash off of his face anyway, depending on your distance to him. So when it comes to weapon mounted light, handheld light is a mandatory item for your everyday carry. The weapon mounted light is optional if it's in your budget, but strongly recommended. But please, please, please buy a well-made weapon mounted light. The weapon mounted light is going to give your gun data. It's going to give you data to operate the firearm in a situation where you need it. If you're using a weapon mounted light, chances are you have a reasonable expectation of using force, which means that light needs to work. It needs to work consistently, it needs to work all the time. There are budget lights out there, but I strongly suggest you stay away from them, because unlike a handheld where we may be using it administratively and it goes dead, it's not that big of a deal. If you're using a weapon mounted light, chances are you need it right then, right then, right then. So please buy a quality light, buy once, make sure you're practicing good preventative maintenance on your batteries and things of that nature. Keep that lens clear. If you go to the range, you dirty up that lens, make sure you clean it before you carry that gun again. As we've seen with handheld light and now with the weapon mounted light for the handgun, again, there's nothing magic about it, but these are things that you have to practice and be proficient with. First chance you get, take a low light course. It is going to be invaluable because it's going to allow you to put context and theory into application and see what's going to work for you, your lifestyle, your carry methods. I'm Aaron Cowan with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.